Now, please be seated. As you probably all know, a prayer service and then a funeral was held this past week in Louisville, Kentucky, the hometown of Muhammad Ali. The prayers and practices of both of these large gatherings were shaped by Muslim tradition, as was Ali's request. Yet it was also fully inclusive of interfaith partners, as we saw the Catholic priest rise and speak, and other Muslims and Jewish rabbis and Buddhists who rang the drums that they so beautifully chanted with. Across races and religions, people were gathered, including native peoples represented by Chief Orens of the Iroquois Nation. Politicians, even comedians gathered, and politicians, Democrat and Republican. Many of you may have listened as well. Stories were told one after the other. One story told by, I think it was a local Louisville representative who had accompanied Ali to an Olympic boxing match some years ago. Ali wasn't in this, he wasn't boxing in this, but rather had come to watch it. And at the end, the United States person had won the match, and Ali was welcomed into the ring to congratulate the winner, and all the cameras were on them, and the crowds were hovering around and roaring and taking it all in. Well, then the speaker said, Ali leaned over down to him and said, "I want to go see the loser." And the speaker said, "You want to go do what?" "I want to go and see the loser." And so this person found out how to make that happen, and they entered into the lonely locker room of the young man who had lost this boxing match. And as soon as Ali walked into that room, they saw this dejected young man sitting over in the corner with a very swollen face, as you could imagine, and no crowds around, no cameras anywhere in sight. He must have been feeling the weight of the world on him, even letting his own country down. But in that moment, he recognized Muhammad Ali as he walked in the room, and he stands up, calling him out by name. And so the speaker talks about how Ali walked in and gave him however he shaped his boxing, and he says, "Show me your stuff, son." And so this young man gets up out of his dejected corner, and they bounce around in the locker room together for a while until Ali gets him in a head grip down here and says, "You were good out there, son. Get back out there again. Don't be discouraged. You are on your way." This young man who had been hovering all alone and brokenhearted in the corner is now standing up tall, again encouraged and with courage. And no cameras caught any of this. But this young man's life was changed, as was the speaker who was telling this story, how he had been touched far more by that locker room exchange than by all that had gone on up on the stage. Recognizing the downtrodden, the brokenhearted, the rejected, even the loser as a human being of great worth and potential. This is the kind of thing we see in Jesus over and over in the Gospels. We see it right here in Luke 7. Jesus had been invited to dinner by a certain Simon, and as they had gathered in the home for dinner, a woman of the city, it tells us. The text also describes her, labels her as a sinner woman. This woman had heard that Jesus had been invited to be at dinner with Simon in this house, and so she found her way there. She gathered up a jar of ointment and she brought it with her. And at first it says she stands behind Jesus, so she doesn't crawl in. She comes in and stands behind Jesus, but then she's kneeling because she's down at his feet, washing his feet with her tears and her hair and this ointment. And then the text tells us that Simon is murmuring. If this Jesus was a prophet, if he was really a prophet, he would know what sort of woman this is who is touching him. Well, the text says he is just murmuring that. Simon, I'm sure, was not meaning for Jesus to overhear him, but Jesus hears, right? So he's caught even in his silent rebellion of not liking what's going on. And Jesus says, ask Simon, do you see this woman? Well, no, obviously he hadn't seen this woman. To be sure, he saw his own irritation that she had found her way into his dinner party uninvited. To be sure, he had seen her neediness, her emotionality, her pushing the limits of pouring oil now all over his floor, and then undoing her hair and letting it hang down as she certainly was not supposed to do. Simon saw all that was going on the surface, but Jesus has a different kind of seeing in mind. Poet pastor Stephen Garnaas Holmes writes of this text, to one of Jesus's most arresting questions, we have to answer, no, we don't see. We see our prejudices and our stereotypes. We see our fears and our projections. We don't see this woman. We see who we think she is. We see a sinner. We see someone disrupting our dinner. We see someone who makes us uncomfortable, which is to say, we see our own judgments, our discomfort. We see our stuff. We don't see her. And I wonder how often this is the case, that we misjudge each other, and especially misjudge the stranger, the unexpected visitor, the surprise interruption, altering our plans. I wonder also if we really see the earth and the sea and the sky and what it is we do to these beloved parts of creation that share existence with us. Do we see what we are doing to each of earth and sea and sky? Do we see how the noises of our city alter what the birds can hear? Some of the birds, they're telling us, can no longer hear the calls of other birds to tell them where they are and how for them to create community with each other. Do we see our neighborhoods? Do we see what it's like to grow up as a teenager in today's world? Do we see what the lives are of these who share our parking lot, who work at the Porsche dealers? But what about the people in the car? What if we were to pray for the people who drive the cars that sit in our parking lot? What is their lot? What are their stresses? And how about the people driving down the freeways who pass us or get in front of us? How about instead of being angry at them, if we were to hold them in prayer. They might need prayer if they keep driving like that, right? And how about the trees that need water? What if we were to see them when we're washing our cars? Jesus asks such a subversive question here. Do you see this woman? Women in Jesus' day were not to be seen. In Jesus asking that question, he's inviting a new way of seeing. Jesus sees this woman as she is. He sees her potential, her vulnerability. He sees how extraordinarily courageous she is. I mean, imagine coming into a party uninvited and going right up to the invited guest, the most important invited guest. She had a lot of nerve. But Jesus sees that what she really has is need and gratitude. She has a need to express her deep gratitude for all that Jesus has done, transforming her life. Jesus saw, because he wasn't so preoccupied with himself. Jesus was present with the eyes of his heart, rather than with the fears of his mind clouding his vision. We see this in one story after another in the Gospels. Jesus saw the woman who gave him a drink at the well. He saw that she too was more than just a sinning woman. Jesus saw blind Bartimaeus as more than just blind. He saw the woman who touched his cloak when everyone else simply saw something to judge. Jesus saw little children as precious, not just as annoying. Jesus saw all of creation desperately in need of being seen. And when Jesus saw, it had the impact much as needed rain does on a field of waiting poppy seeds. Being seen, people bloom like poppies in the first good rain. And if you haven't gone out to see when that happens, it's amazing what happens to poppies. But no less happens to people when we really see them. You and I can have that kind of positive impact in our world. Muhammad Ali is just one example. Look at you. Look at all the positive impact you can have in the world with eyes that see, that really see. We see now that honeybees aren't to be exterminated when they have built a hive in a place that we don't want that hive to be. There are now beekeepers trying to get the word out, to call them, and they will come and remove those bees and put them in a better place. Finally, because we're seeing the importance of bees, we're acting differently toward them. May God help us to really see our neighbor, see strangers, see the uninvited guest, see the created world that we walk by every day. And dear friends, the next time you look in the mirror, see in that person a beloved of God, one upon whom God's favor and mercy shines each and every day. Mercy and favor are what make the world go round. Amen. Mercy and favor are what flow through the French-speaking Canadian L'Arche community, from where today's hymn of the day comes. This L'Arche community was started because a few people saw that people with traumatic disabilities are beautiful people of God. People who cannot care for themselves in any way because their bodies don't let them. These are people who are cared for at the L'Arche community with great dignity and love. And today, L'Arche communities have been started in various places around the world. One beautiful hymn from the L'Arche community is in our hymnal. It's number 804. It's new to us, so we wanted to introduce it on a Sunday when our choir can help us with it. It's number 808. 808.